I'm back and today I discovered something amazing. A Nintendo Game & Watch Tetris prototype. It was rumored for about 35 years. Nobody has actually seen one and even Nintendo employees debate whether it exists or not. And in this video I'm going to have a look at it and I found the owner of the prototype and asked him some questions. Here we go.
Let's all turn on the tube. This is hot dog soup.
In 1989 Nintendo released the Game Boy and it was launched with a game called Tetris, which Nintendo licensed from Alexei Pajitnov, the original creator. And partly thanks to this license, the Game Boy became an instant hit. It was a major success. Before the Game Boy was released, Nintendo sold a large series of handheld games called Game & Watch. And they had about sort of like 60 of them, and I myself owned almost all of them. According to a couple of sources on the internet, before the Game Boy was released with Tetris, Nintendo apparently was already working on a Game & Watch version of the same game. And apparently they decided not to release it for some reason. Probably because it would negatively impact the sales of the Game Boy. So, that was according to some people on the internet. Was it the truth? We don't really know. Nobody had seen it until April this year, when a guy called Hiroyuki Maeda published a couple of photos on Twitter claiming that it is indeed a prototype of Game & Watch Tetris. And it looked like a regular dual screen Game & Watch machine, but it contains a game that resembles Tetris. Over the past 35 years there's been a lot of discussion about the existence of a prototype like this. There's even debate amongst former Nintendo employees whether it really exists or not. In 1988 Nintendo did receive the rights to create a handheld version of Tetris, so it is probable that it worked on a Game & Watch version as well as the Game Boy version. So could it be real or is this just an elaborate hoax? Let's have a look. First of all, the game doesn't have any graphics or logos on it, or indeed the title, which is of course perfectly normal if it's a prototype. The case that is used, or the outer shell of it, has the number JB63 on it, which is a very well-known case. It's the case of an already existing Game & Watch game called SaveBuster. The front, however, is from a different game because it contains a D-pad which SaveBuster didn't have. But of course, if this is a prototype, it's perfectly normal that they use some parts of games that they already had. So the casing, yes, it may look unusual, but it's not unusual at all. The game itself, however, is kind of unusual. First of all, a thing that immediately springs to mind for me is that it contains a couple of clowns in the graphics. These clowns are really odd. It's sort of a circus setting in which the game is being played. These clowns look sort of weird and are not really similar to any Nintendo characters or indeed Game & Watch characters. And the circus setting for Tetris is not part of the original Tetris at all. So that's a little bit weird. An explanation for this could be that Nintendo maybe didn't have the license for Tetris yet while they were developing this. So they made a game that seemed a little bit like Tetris, but wasn't exactly Tetris. And this may also explain the following. When playing this game, the entire board moves left and right instead of just the block that you're dropping at the moment. So as you can see in the video of the guy that's playing this, he's a little bit confused by this because the screen moves counter to the direction of the block. You could even argue that this isn't Tetris at all, but you know, the shapes of the blocks are there and you have to make lines to make them go away. The sound effects are really Game & Watchy and they're just perfectly normal for any Game & Watch game, so there's no problem with that. There are two game modes, Game A and Game B, like every Game & Watch game. Game A is easier and Game B is the hard mode. There's also a clock button and a reset button like every other Game & Watch game has. There's also a video available about the inside of this device and it shows a regular Game & Watch logic board with just one chip and a couple of batteries. The logic board does however state the TR-66 model number, which is the official model number of Tetris. So, is this a real prototype made by Nintendo or is it a hoax? Well, as far as I can see, the video is really showing an actual device playing an actual game. So I don't think it's video manipulation or AI or anything. So I think it's a real device and somebody actually really made it and built it. Could it be a mod or a hobbyist project? Yes, it could, but it's really elaborate, and because of the strangeness of the graphics with the clowns, it makes me feel that it's actually real. A hoaxer would probably create a version that actually really was the same as Tetris, or would indeed copy Game Boy Tetris on a dual screen. Well, of course, it's very easy to create the chip containing the code, but the LCD screen is really custom made for this game, which would make it a really elaborate hoax if it were a hoax. So my feeling is that this is real and it's an actual prototype. But to find out more about this, I contacted the journalist and writer who first reported about this device. And then I thought, well, I've got 280 subscribers, nobody knows me, I'm not important at all, probably I won't get any answers. But I got my answers, and very quickly too. So first of all, he says there is no way to prove whether this is real or fake, because Tetris is a frozen project under development. As long as people concerned have not testified, you can only judge by looking at the real thing. And I think I agree with that. And like I said, to me, it looks and feels like a real thing. And he also invited me to come over to his place and actually hold it and play with it and look at the thing. Well, I'm in the Netherlands and he's in Japan. I don't have the budget to do that. I would love to do it. But judging from the videos, if I played it and hold it in my hand, I would think I would be convinced that it is actually a real game. Is it made by Nintendo? You never know by playing it. So he himself is the owner of this Tetris game, which he confirms. He's a writer and journalist and he writes about games. He also publishes books about games and retro games. And he photographed this game to promote his new book. So there's a little bit of a sensation angle there. Could it be that this is a hoax to promote the book? Or is it a nice coincidence to have this game to promote the book? I don't know. He then tells me that he received it 5 years ago. But if you had it already for 5 years, why don't you publish about it sooner? If you have this big of a scoop, what? About the value, Mr. Maeda says, well, it doesn't really have a value because it's not a real product and it hasn't been released, etc, etc. It's just a prototype. Well, I think if you put it on eBay, you can get a lot of money for it. It's worth thousands, 10,000s, if not 100,000 euros, I'm guessing. Because there are real Game & Watch games that are rare, that you can buy on eBay, that already cost thousands of euros. So I think this is really valuable, even though Mr. Maeda humbly thinks there's not really a value to be mentioned. So how about the proof? Does Mr. Maeda have any documentation or other things to prove that this is a real Nintendo Tetris prototype? Well, he says, I was able to confirm this when I disassembled the prototype. The model number of the Unreleased TR-66 is printed on the board. The chip that is used is a 4-bit ASIC chip, and it's the same configuration that all Game & Watch games had at the time. If you want to fake this in modern times, it's overwhelmingly easier to use an FPGA. Or I can imagine a lot of other types of programmable chips. He continues, I think it's unreasonable to make something identical to the primitive design at the time because of the cost problem. Well, I agree with that. Why would you go through lengths and in such a way to produce something like this in the old-fashioned way with an old chip and an old circuit board just to hoax something? And of course, this isn't really that big of a news item because it's been out for 2 months and there's only a couple of obscure websites that have written about it. It's not a bombshell that's been dropped in Nintendo history. Well, to me it is, because I'm a Game & Watch lover, but you know, what's there to gain from it? So yes, I agree with Mr. Maeda. If it is a hoax, it's really good. It's really good. And it's really hard to imagine that somebody would make something that elaborate for just a little bit of attention. And of course, Mr. Maeda didn't put it on eBay to become rich. He just used it to promote his book. So the only thing strange about this is, if he owned it for about 5 years already, why did he just publish it now and not earlier? So, there you go. I think this game is amazing, first of all. Even if it is a hoax, it's amazing and I really would love to have it. and I would love to play it. So that's great. It really actually looks like a real Game & Watch game. It sounds and feels like a Nintendo Game & Watch game. I've owned almost all, I think I didn't have 2 of them. I almost had all of them. I played all of them. I know their cadence, I know how they feel, I know their response, I know how it sounds to play Nintendo Game & Watch games. And this game actually does it all correctly. So that also makes me think it is a real, an actual game made by Nintendo. Now only we have to wait until actual people from Nintendo come forward and tell us, yes, this is real, yes, I worked on it, etc, etc. Maybe they're not allowed to because Nintendo is very strict about everything. It's just ridiculous. So it's a nice piece of Nintendo Game & Watch history. And even if it is a hoax, it's wonderful. I think it deserves a thumbs up. It's great. So I think it's real. Mr. Maeda thinks it's real, and I want to thank him for answering my questions. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you liked it, please like it. If you don't like it, please dislike it. Please subscribe. Please comment. I want some more comments. I love comments. I love to hear what you think. What do you think? Is this a hoax? Is this real? Do you have additional information? Do you have links that show me more about this? Please comment some more. And I also have a subreddit now, but I privated it because I'm protesting against the whole Reddit thing. So don't join the subreddit because you can't. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.